This is a tutorial on Parallax. We'll need to use Adobe Photoshop and Adobe After Effects to complete this example. Here's a 2D image. The first thing we need to do is cut out the different layers in this photo. What you want to do is you want to cut out something in the foreground, maybe something mid-ground, and then work on the background image back here. So we need to cut it apart and create separate layers, and it could be 2, 3, or 4 layers, probably nothing more than 4 layers that we would need for this effect. So I'm just going to double click on the background layer to turn it into a layer. Then I'm going to just quickly use the selection tool up here in the upper left to make a quick selection, and you want to be a lot more precise about cutting out your objects and putting them on their own layer. So I would spend quite a bit of time trying to cut out the different elements within this photo, and you can use any selection means that you find most comfortable with. So there we go. There's one of the layers, and I'm going to copy Command C and paste this layer into a new layer here. So if I were to turn off the background layer, there's my layer. I'm going to turn off that new layer that I created, which is this baseball player. And then the next thing you want to do is you want to kind of fill in areas over the top of your baseball player. So I'm going to use what is called the rubber stamp tool over here on the left. And if you use your left and right bracket on your keyboard, you can increase or decrease the size of your brush. And then what you do is you pick a target spot on the background by holding down your Option key and then left clicking, and then move your cursor over and start painting, and you can see where your target is. Your target paints over your object. Now remember, this is the background image. You'll see in a minute. So what you do is you try to paint out as much of the layer as possible. I'll get as far as I can here. You don't have to do the entire baseball player, but I'll probably get pretty close here. So you do the best you can on kind of filling in the background image. That's the idea, to get this to work. So that's probably good enough, but I would probably continue rubber stamping this lower layer. My baseball player still exists. He's up on this layer 1, so if I turn that on, he's still there. And so what I would probably do is I'd probably then cut this player out, and then maybe the ump, and I would have maybe 3 or 4 layers on this. And so once I'm all set there, I can hit the save button, and we'll save this one to the desktop, and then we're done with that. There's not much more you need to do in Photoshop. So you're taking a 2D image, you're cutting out different parts of that image and creating separate layers. You're looking for a picture that has something in the foreground, maybe something mid-ground, and then perhaps a really similar type background back here. It could be maybe it's a mountainscape or something like that. And then what you do is you start rubber stamping in that background image, and then leave all the new layers separated from the background. And then you save it as a PSD file, and then you get back into After Effects, and then you do File, Import, and import that file. And you want to import the PSD file, and it says import as, and we don't want footage, we want composition retain layer sizes. And then go ahead and open that up, hit OK, and you'll see you've got a composition here, and then inside this folder you have your layers. All you have to do is double click on the composition, and then you get to see your different layers here, right? So now the idea is to get some movement going on in here. Right over here it says active camera. If I hold that down, I can look at it from the top, or I can look at it back from the active camera. Those are the two different areas you'll be watching. So what we need to do first, for each layer, we need to turn on the 3D layer effect right here. Now when I go to the top view, you can see just a thin line here, and what you're doing is you're seeing layers 0 and 1 here. And if I grab like layer 1, which is a baseball player, and I pull that forward and maybe grab the background layer and move that backwards, and then I look at the camera view, you can see that the background image has, or the layer 0 has gone back into perspective, so it's further back. So therefore it looks smaller, and the baseball player actually came forward, so it looks a little bit bigger. And that's the idea. So now you can also make those adjustments, in the transformation tool as well. You can continue pushing or pulling that foreground image back or forward, and do the same with the layer 0. But the important step here, next step, would be to go under to layer 0, your background image, go to transform, and you're going to need to scale that background image up. And it's going to be a little bit bigger than, than your stage here. So that's the really important part of this, is that the background layer that has been rubber stamped in Photoshop needs to be scaled up, and then also needs to be pulled back in the, what we call, I'm going to go to the top view, what we call the Z position. So it's back here, and here's your layer 1. So I'm going to go back to active camera. So that's that. Then all you have to do is go to layer pull down menu at the top, go to new, and add a new camera. And by default you could just hit OK here. If you want to mess around with different camera angles, you can do so. But I'm just going to hit OK here, and now I've got a new camera, and now you can see the effect occur. You can actually keyframe out movements of your camera. So if I wanted to kind of move the camera inward, I could hit a keyframe here at position, move it out, and then change and have this kind of zoom in, and then come back to along the timeline at 0, and maybe there's a slight rotation, in the Y rotation. We could also go to layer 1, which is a baseball player, and maybe have its position move slightly to the left or right. And so the idea is to create some subtle movement over time on your timeline, and you can kind of see the background kind of moves back behind the baseball player and so forth. So now you've got more of a 3D effect using 2D layers within After Effects. And finally, what you can do then is to work with what we call puppet pinning. So I'm going to go to layer 1, and up at the top of After Effects there's this little pin. If you click on that pin, you can left click and put little dots on areas of the baseball player where there may be some rotation. So just think about something that might allow you to rotate, like your wrists or your elbow. So once you add these points, you can find these points, by the way, in your layer 1 under Puppet Effects, in Mesh 1 under Deform. Here are all the puppets I just added. You can grab those and delete those, but you can also animate those over time as well. So by default right now, one of our puppet pins, I'll grab this one up here on the bat, has a keyframe assigned to it already. So if I move my playback head out and I move the bat slightly up, you can see I'm creating some movement with the bat using puppet pinning. So then I can come back to 0, maybe grab the wrist. It has a keyframe already, so I bring the playback head out over time, and then maybe move the wrist as well. So now you get the 2D movement of the player and the background image, and then you also get some movement using puppet pinning on that specific layer. So now you get both the parallax effect, and that's allowing the background image to kind of slide back and forth behind the baseball player, and also getting a puppet pin effect here as well. So that is parallax and puppet pinning.